everyone, I'm Heather, and in today's video I'm continuing with a series about my past cruises, and I'm going through them in chronological order and sharing with you some details about each cruise and what the 3 best and 3 worst things were about that cruise. My second ever cruise was my very first cruise on Royal Caribbean. I really like Royal Caribbean. Our family really enjoys Royal Caribbean. We've overall had very positive experiences on all of our Royal Caribbean cruises. I would say that this particular cruise that I'm going to talk about today, even though I got a positive impression of Royal Caribbean from this cruise, it was probably definitely my least favorite Royal Caribbean cruise. But that was not because of Royal Caribbean. Rather, it was because of who I went on the cruise with, okay? Which kind of is an important thing to remember. When you're choosing a cruise, I always talk in my videos about how important it is to choose the right cruise line and the right ship for your personality. But I also feel it's very important to choose, and this isn't just cruising, this is any kind of travel. It's very important to choose the correct travel companions. And you'll hear it said, don't travel with anyone you don't love. And I think that's very true. And I'll tell you a little bit more in a little bit here in the video. Okay, so my second cruise was just a little over a year after my first cruise. And my very first cruise was on Disney Magic with my son. And I talked about that in this video. So you can go back and watch that one if you want to hear all about my first cruise, which was absolutely terrific. Okay, so my second cruise was actually my honeymoon. I was not married when I had my son Andrew. He has a different dad than my other 2 kids. And I met my husband not too long actually after Andrew and I went on that first cruise on Disney Magic. And we got married in October of 2002. And I'm just going to tell you right now the same thing I tell my kids. Don't do what I did. 2 big mistakes that I like to give everyone as a warning. Online dating can be really bad, okay, and a really bad way to meet people. And secondly, don't marry someone unless you've been dating them at least a year, okay? I got married in less time than that. That was not a good move. All right, so there you go. There's my little mom warning of the day. All right, so we went on our honeymoon on Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas, which again was a pretty new ship at the time. I think it was about the same age as the Disney Magic was when we went on that. It was 2 or 3 years old, so it was a nice new ship in the Voyager class for Royal Caribbean. I didn't video any of these early cruises because I didn't really have the means to, and also I didn't start my YouTube channel until 2018, so many years later. Cruise with Ben and David have been doing, at the time I'm filming this, they have been doing a whole series about a cruise they've taken on Explorer of the Seas. So if you want to see more of that ship and what a cruise on that ship is like, check out their recent videos because they have had quite a few videos on Explorer of the Seas. And I think it's a Western Caribbean cruise that they did, and my husband and I did an Eastern Caribbean cruise. So the itinerary was a little different, but the ship and the activities and dining and everything were very similar. So if you want to see more detail of what Explorer of the Seas is like, check out their videos. I knew I wanted to take a cruise for our honeymoon. I did know that October is still hurricane season. We were aware of that. Now, I have taken several cruises during hurricane season, and we've never had a problem. The nice thing about cruising during hurricane season, there's 2 nice things. One is cruises tend to be cheaper. And the reason they're cheaper is because people don't want to cruise during hurricane season. Okay? The second thing is you really don't have to worry about bad weather on the ship when you're out at sea. Cruise ships can move, and the captain does a very good job of avoiding going into bad weather. They're not going to go right through a hurricane on a ship. Okay, what you're more in danger or in risk of happening if you cruise during hurricane season and there's a hurricane is that you might miss ports or your itinerary will get changed. Like, for example, Hurricane Lee, at the time I'm filming this, is coming toward the United States in the Caribbean. It's affecting the current cruise on Disney Fantasy. They were supposed to go to Bermuda, or it might still be Hurricane Idalia. I'm not sure. There's been a lot of hurricanes altogether. But I just read this morning that the current cruise on the Disney Fantasy has gotten changed, or the upcoming one maybe. And instead of going to Bermuda, they're going to do a Western Caribbean cruise instead. So you might have something like that happen. I've heard just the past couple of weeks, because we're at peak hurricane season right now in early September, cruises have gotten changed. They'll get changed from either a Western Caribbean to an Eastern Caribbean or vice versa. One cruise I know Tony on Lolita Loca talked about, I can't remember who it was. They were supposed to go to Bermuda, but instead now they're going up and doing a Canada cruise. So they'll do that kind of thing where they will change the itinerary to avoid getting stuck in the hurricane or having any kind of bad weather. Ship captains on cruise ships, their number one priority is safety. Their second priority is guest comfort. They want the passengers to be comfortable. They don't want passengers to get seasick. Okay, so they'll do the best they can to maintain smooth seas on the ship. That's easier to do the bigger your ship is. Smaller ships will feel more motion. The other thing that can happen if you cruise during hurricane season, this just happened to Tony and Jenny from Lolita Loca. They were on a Carnival cruise that went out of Tampa, and they couldn't get back to Tampa. That was Hurricane Idalia, and the hurricane was going through, or had just gone through, when they were supposed to return to Tampa, and the port of Tampa was closed because of flooding. So they couldn't go back when they were supposed to, so they got like an extra sea day. And Tony talked in a couple different videos about how people were upset, but they didn't understand this is something that can happen if you take the chance of cruising during hurricane season. Now again, going back to this cruise I'm talking about today, we didn't have any trouble at all. The only time actually that I had any kind of really rough seas because of a tropical storm or hurricane was on Royal Caribbean's Harmony of the Seas in June of 2022. And that was just a tropical storm. And the captain did do his best to avoid it, but he had to get us back to Port Canaveral, and I think he went like around a different way around some of the islands in the Bahamas to get back, but he still kind of caught the tail end of it, and it was pretty rough. But we didn't get sick at all that time. We actually thought it was kind of fun. So that's an example, because it was Harmony of the Seas, which is one of the biggest ships there is, and we didn't feel anything. But we could see it, and you could, the rain and the wind and the waves and everything was really cool, but we didn't really feel it on the ship. Our cruise on Explorer of the Seas was October of 2022. It was me and my husband, obviously, because it was our honeymoon. Again, we made the mistake of flying down the day of our cruise, but I don't think we had much choice in the matter because we both worked full-time at the time, and we had to, we couldn't take any more time off of work than that. And also, I already had a child. I had Andrew, who at the time was 5, and I had to leave him at home with somebody, and I didn't want to be away from him any longer than was absolutely necessary. I had help choosing this cruise from cruise.com. An agent at cruise.com helped me choose the ship. It was a very similar itinerary. Again, it was Eastern Caribbean, what I had done before. I had a good experience with the Eastern Caribbean, so I was totally fine about going back there. It's like it didn't even occur to me to choose a different itinerary. I knew I wanted another 7-night, but they helped me choose this ship, and I think they helped me choose my room. And again, I suspect that I went with an ocean view stateroom again because I had been perfectly happy with our ocean view stateroom on Disney Magic the year before, and I think I probably didn't want to spend the amount of money I needed for a balcony. I'm kind of wondering if balconies were a lot more expensive than ocean view staterooms back then in the early 2000s. Because I'm really surprised. I never wanted to get a balcony. The problem with our stateroom, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay. And then we were table sharing, again, with quite a few people. We were at a big table on that cruise, 10 or 12 people total. And it was mostly couples. Yeah, it was all couples with one exception. One of the couples that was at our table on this cruise was an older couple, like in their 60s or 70s, and they had their grandson with them. And he was 12, 13 years old, and they were on like cruise number 90 something. And they said that in recent years, they took one grandchild on each cruise, which I thought was really cool. So each grandkid got a chance to have a cruise, just them, with their grandparents just every time they went on a cruise, which was obviously quite frequently, they took one of their grandkids. So I thought that was really neat. And then there were 2 or 3 or 4 other couples. I don't really remember anybody very well. I remember I didn't particularly like being at a big table like that, but my husband did. My husband is very much an extrovert and I'm an introvert. And so he was happy as can be to talk to everybody and stuff. Whereas I was hoping, especially because it was my honeymoon, I don't think I knew that you could probably request a table for 2 at that time. And I thought it would be more, romantic and stuff if it was just the 2 of us. And so I remember being kind of disappointed by that. But I still was very much a cruise newbie and didn't know all the things you could ask for at the time. Our itinerary on that cruise was again in Eastern Caribbean. We went out of Miami, which was a new experience for me. And we went to San Juan, Puerto Rico, and we went to St. Martin. I don't think we went to St. Thomas. I think it was San Juan, St. Martin, Nassau maybe? Again, I don't remember, but it was something like that. But I know we went to St. Martin and San Juan. Okay, here are the 3 best things about our cruise on Explorer of the Seas in 2002. This was October 2002. First best thing was the service. I was very, very happy with the service on Royal Caribbean. I remember thinking, I don't know if the service is going to be as good as it was on Disney Cruise Line, but I was very, very pleased with the service on that cruise on Explorer of the Seas. They were very attentive. They did some extra little things for us because it was our honeymoon. Like they brought us a special little cake at dinner one night. I think they decorated our room or something. Just very attentive, very nice, good service. Very happy with the service on that cruise. Okay, the second best thing, formal nights was a much bigger deal back then. So early 2000s, when it was formal night, everybody dressed up. And something interesting, I remember on that cruise, you could rent a tuxedo. So that used to be a thing on some ships, at least, that they had tuxedo rental. Now, what my husband decided to do, because we anticipated going on a lot of cruises and he knew that he was going to need a tuxedo for formal nights, because formal nights were a big deal back then, he actually bought his wedding tuxedo. So the tuxedo that he wore in our wedding to get married in, he bought it instead of renting it. And then we rented from the ship different vests and bow ties for him to wear to match the dresses that I wore. So that was actually really cool. And I really wish they still had that. But so few people wear tuxedos and full evening gowns anymore on formal night that it probably just, there's not demand for it. But I wonder if there would be more demand for it if they still offered that service. I don't know. But I remember that. And I remember we had 2 formal nights. I know exactly what the dresses are that I wore. And I was very, very, very skinny then. And I looked beautiful in the dresses that we wore. And he wore his tuxedos. And many, many people did. I mean, the other people at our table, I remember every other guy was wearing a tuxedo. The women all wore evening gowns. We really liked that. We thought that was really neat. I mean, prior to that, the only time I had had any opportunity to get that dressed up was prom in high school. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the formal nights, and that was kind of a neat thing to get all dressed up like that and take pictures and everything like that. So that was the second best thing. And then the third best thing I would say was meeting people. Again, my husband was very talkative and really enjoyed meeting people and talking to people, and was much more open to doing that than I was. And so he would kind of get me out of my shell and have me talk to people. And just the people that we ate with, there was a couple times that we ate lunch in the main dining room and were seated with other people and we had nice conversations with them. And we met this one couple and we actually got off the ship with them. They were also on their honeymoon. And we got off the ship with them in San Juan and hung out with them for part of the time. And we also did a couple other activities, met up with them and did a couple other activities on the ship. The worst 3 things about our cruise on Explorer of the Seas in 2002. Number 1 was our cabin. I wasn't really thrilled with our cabin. It was an ocean view stateroom, technically like what we had on Disney Magic, but we were at the bow of the ship where the front of the ship slopes down. You'll see these on the front of those Royal Caribbean ships. And so we couldn't see anything out our porthole because the ceiling was angled like this. Now, because of the position of the stateroom though, it was quite a bit bigger than a lot of them are. We had a lot of floor space, you know, around the bed and everything. We had a lot of room to walk around. But that one whole side of the stateroom was angled like this, so you couldn't really go there because it got too short. And you couldn't really see anything out the porthole except for sky. You couldn't see where you were. You couldn't see the ocean. So I was disappointed with that. And so I wish I had chosen a different stateroom for that cruise. The second worst thing was I felt kind of bored on that cruise. And interestingly, I'm going to say the same thing about our 2018 cruise on Mariner of the Seas, which is a sister ship of Explorer of the Seas. And I am not sure with both of those cruises, because that was actually my first and second cruises on Royal Caribbean. I'm not sure if they didn't have all the same activities and options for things to do as they do now, or if I just didn't know what they were and I wasn't aware of them. It could also be a combination of those two things. So I just remember feeling kind of bored on the cruise because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing a lot of the time. And like I've talked about before, I'm not a hot weather, laying in the sun type person. And so I don't like the top deck. That's not my jam, you know, so I really prefer doing like more activities and stuff inside the ship. And so I guess I just didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And then the other problem I had on this particular cruise goes with my third worst thing about this cruise, which was my travel companion. Part of the reason I was so bored is because my husband kept going off by himself, both on the ship and in port, and leaving me by myself. So I thought we were going to be, you know, it's our honeymoon. I thought we were going to be doing all these fun things together. That's what I envisioned. Is that not what you envision when you go on your honeymoon? That you're going to be spending all your time together, doing fun things together and enjoying each other and doing romantic things. Well, apparently he didn't care about any of that, because I just remember a great deal of oh no, we did go to St. Thomas. I remember now. He completely abandoned me on our shore excursion at Magens Bay. He went off God knows where, and I was left at the beach at Magens Bay alone for hours. And I remember I was so sad and I was so disappointed. And he held up the shore excursion's return to the ship. And everybody was on the truck Jeep thing except him. And they were mad. And I remember when he finally sauntered back like 30, 40 minutes late. I mean, they waited for him because it was a ship shore excursion. And the ship probably had to wait for us. I don't know. People were really grumbling. And when he got back on and sat next to me and everybody realized he was my husband, I was so embarrassed. And I just wanted to crawl in a hole and die, because I'm like, yes, this is my husband that held everybody up. I was just like, oh my gosh. So it was that kind of thing. And I just remember all the time, like he was going off and doing things on the ship. I don't know where he was going, and leaving me alone. And I couldn't find him. There was no way to communicate. Again, I don't think we had cell phones back then. There were no like wave phones like they have sometimes in staterooms. There was no way to communicate with him other than like to leave a note in the room. And I think there were things that I wanted to go to together, but he was never around. And so I didn't want to go to the things by myself. I've had that experience even more recently. I'll try to go to like games and stuff by myself, and I just feel awkward and weird, and so I don't stay. And so if I don't know if I could ever do cruising solo. I really don't. And I'm a little bit worried about that as my kids get older, but I feel very awkward and self-conscious if I'm trying to do things by myself on a cruise ship. And so the fact that he kept leaving me alone like that, I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt silly trying to do things by myself. And so that might have been part of the reason I was also that I was bored, is because there were possibly things I wanted to go to, and I didn't have anybody to go with me because I didn't know where my husband was. So that was definitely a big bummer. And I remember being very disappointed with that trip as a whole, with my honeymoon as a whole, because of that. Let's just say there's plenty of reasons why I'm not married time anymore. And I was very happy to get divorced. Most people aren't very happy. I mean, I was sad at the time, but overall, I was very happy to get divorced, and I'm perfectly fine not being married anymore. So anyway, that was the 3 best and 3 worst things about my very first cruise on Royal Caribbean and my honeymoon cruise. So I hope that you found this interesting, helpful, informative. If you did, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. And if you don't want to miss the other videos I'm going to make in this series from my other past cruises, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. And remember, subscribing is free, does not cost you anything. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you all have a great day. Safe travels.